if you connect two rings with each other, you kind of have the symbol of 8. But then if you overlap them with each other, you get the Vesica Pisces, or the and if you like multiply that by how many times, you get the flower of life, which is the Vesica Pisces, of course, because we are born through the Vesica Pisces of the divine feminine.
Yeah, interestingly, the letter Ayin went from being like an 8 to becoming the Vesica Pisces, which now represents the eye.
I can see that. I can definitely see that, especially with reptiles and cats. Like, cats are the only other animal aside from reptiles who have that slit pupil, which kind of is the Vesica Pisces as well, because you have the round of the eye and the slit pupil, or the
There's
almond
a legend of a
shape.
giant here in Western North Carolina that had slit eyes. It's very anomalous to me. I can't imagine that there would be, like you said, something that's not a feline. Or what are the other creatures that have those? Did you say a goat?
Felines and reptiles. They are the only ones.
But there's a legend of a giant here with 7 fingers on each hand called Jedicula, and he supposedly had slit eyes. He lived here thousands of years ago, and there's some petroglyphs in a stone nearby that he
7 fingers.
Yeah, and there's a handprint of his is on the stone.
Because usually they say with the giants that it's 6 fingers on each hand.
Yeah.
So but this is
the thing is, like, we see
another giant creature.
There's strange features in the giants, like double rows of teeth and 6 fingers. But there's a good chance that the giants were a hybrid, and that we're a hybrid as well, and we have some of the genes of the giants within us. But they find what was called the Homo capensis was the name given to this species when they found the Boskop man. When they have an elongated skull with a greater cranial volume, and they have extra digits and rows of teeth, they can have more than 6 fingers when they have an extremely large elongated skull. And so that's thought to be the mother race of the missing link. And so the other species that have those similar features have diminished aspects of those features. So their skulls are not as elongated. They might not have as many digits. But these features are said to have come from exposure to aquatic habitation. So if they had lived in the sea for millions of years, as is thought, they would develop webbed fingers with more digits and ultimately turning into a fin. And they may have had that the fins don't show up in the paleontological fossil because it's cartilaginous.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. It kind of goes into the aquatic ape theory, which is fascinating. Like, one half of our species, climbed down the trees and made their way onto land, and the other half made their way into water, because especially for apes, or especially for apes, I guess for apes, the only way that they can truly walk upright is in water, and that would be a explanation of why man walks upright instead of forests.
I don't necessarily think that apes and humans or hominids had the same lineage, as far
shared
as
lineage, perhaps,
apes at one point, but they probably have a shared root lineage where maybe they were a primitive mammal and developed on a similar parallel evolution lines.
I mean, the evolutionary timeline, it's just so many branches, and we're just one of those branches. And mankind as a whole, we're not pure, if you will. We're not one species. There are a whole lot of people who still have quite a large amount of Neanderthal DNA, who had I believe they had like somewhat elongated skulls, like flatter, I believe, but like more elongated towards the back.
Yeah, they did have a large brain capacity, and they had a larger nasal capacity too.
Yeah.
They had a lot of interesting features. They're very prominent and very capable. A lot smarter than we thought. They're tool makers.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, goats as well. Yeah.
I think there's a very interesting notion to look at here, because we talk about evolution. I believe in what's the word? That the adaptation, and that adaptation is something that can be observed. Species adapt. In other words, if your thumb isn't short enough and you need to do something and you keep trying to do something, your children will have longer thumbs.
Yeah.
So just imagine what the PlayStation is and the Xbox is going to do to our kids' fingers.
So there was a theory of
And our
evolution.
grandkids, because they have different fingers, man. Like fingers are going to be designed for doing this, and phones and keyboards. It's going to change our fingers.
Epigenetics we talked about.
Epigenetics is making Lamarckian evolution come back into the drawing board. Lamarckian evolution was thrown out by Darwinism when they found out that a woman is born with all of her eggs already developed genetically. So they suggested that when they found that out, that her behaviors in her life would not affect the genetic material of her eggs at all. But now that we find in epigenetics that if a woman develops diabetes or alcoholism during her lifetime, that the genetic material of her eggs can be altered and changed and then be passed down to her young ones. And so now we're considering Lamarckian evolution might be right on.
But we're already seeing adaptation or evolution with, I believe, a tribe who lives, in one of those islands on the in the Indian Ocean. They are
the Norse
predominant. No, that's a whole other story. Sentinel Island, that's a whole other story. That's fascinating. But no, like they are. They like predominantly eat fish, of course, so they spend a lot of time, literally a whole lot of time, underwater, and they have started to adapt to that. So their spleen has grown bigger as to better like circulate the blood and allow for more oxygen in the blood. They can adjust their eyesight to be able to see underwater, and that is all just out of a basic necessity because of their lifestyle. They've already grown to at least adapt to that. And adaptation, evolution, well, for now it's adaptation, larger organs and different functions and all of that, which is fascinating. I mean, it's over the generations, of course, but still they're not
to tie this all in. I think those people were said to know what a tsunami signs are going to be when the tide comes out. They know that there's a tsunami coming because they have legends of a great ancient flood there. And I think I've heard their story about that. Those people are incredible. They're usually out at sea fishing most of the time, I think, from what I've seen about them. And they swim in the water a lot with nets and stuff. It's really cool. But the Zulu people actually have an interesting story that they said that there was no moon and there was no seasons 12,000 years ago. And when the moon came and crashed into Earth, that's when the seasons began.
That's an interesting concept. And David Icke believes that the moon was put there deliberately so that there are a lot of different ideas that can be scratched. I mean, I don't know whether the years and the numbers added are necessarily correct and relevant, because I have a feeling that the numbers are wrong, because the pyramids seem to be about 12,000 years old. So somebody built pyramids here at that point ago. Yeah. So if the pyramids are 12,000 years ago, then why were they not destroyed if the moon crashed into the earth at that point? I'm guessing that these great floods were way further back, and that the pyramids were rebuilt by the subsequent cultures that had the knowledge of the giants of the ancients and copied the technology, and we built our own pyramids. So now we are thinking that the pyramids are built by, I know we built it, Sure, we got the technology from someone else, but we built them. They were ours. We had this knowledge. But I want to just make a point on the difference between adaptation and evolution. I think that this is a moot point. Like, evolution begs the question. There's a lot of assumption. Okay, so we've seen adaptation happen. So now we're just going to assume that because this creature and this creature and this creature share certain genes, that they must have adapted from this creature or from the same point. But we don't know really. The further we go back, the less we know. We don't know whether the one came from the other or the other came from the one, right? And we don't know that they came from each other. Like you say, they could have come from a shared ancestry, or and this is very interesting because there were all these creatures that were in the ancient Greek stories that we are saying are just myth. I don't believe they were myth. They're telling us the giants were myth. Come on. We know the giants weren't myths. So if the giants weren't myth, then who's to say Medusa was a myth? Who's to say that the Cyclops was a myth? Who's to say that all these other creatures and dwarves were those myths? I don't believe they were myths. I think they were real creatures on Earth. And so, like, a lot of what we've been taught by the so-called established sciences is based upon assumptions. They just assume it's a myth, so it's a myth. They just assume because we can see adaptation that evolution is the answer. It's a big gap to fill without enough evidence to say that that's the sequence or that's the happening. And if we look at the Sumerian records, they speak about how it took like tens of thousands of years to make Lulu, the human. And in the process of trying to make human, they tried and tried and tried, and they made all these other creatures. And they talk about how in Eden, they had all these big cages hanging with all these creatures that they didn't know what to do with. Ethically and morally, they couldn't just destroy them because they had some of their own genetics in them. This is our cousin. This is like a really messed up version of our cousin, but this is our cousin. And I think at some point, these creatures were allowed to roam the planet and evolve from their own natural thing. But they could have been the attempts at making human beings. Hence, all the similarities. Hence, all the same genetics. And this goes back to the stories of the mating between the giants and the humans. The 200 egregori, as they're called in Greek. So I think that there's a lot here. I don't think I can know definitively anything,
but it's good to see as adaptation. You see that the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, who are similar to the Neanderthals, didn't have a coat of fur either. So if there was a point in our ancestry where we were adapting to aquatic habitation, maybe the Neanderthals and Denisovans came out of the sea first, and so did not develop as far as we had. But we both had developed losing our coat of fur somewhere, whether that was aquatic or subterranean. But having a coat of fur is essential when you live on a terrestrial environment because of the wind. When the wind hits you, the friction of the wind can create heat and wind burn at high temperatures, but wind will usually just blow the moisture off of your skin and make you cold and dry. So to not have a coat of fur is indicative of aquatic ancestry.
You know, when you make Indy, I also have a thought on the idea that we don't have fur. I think that perhaps skin is also kind of a variable in terms of a higher level of consciousness. Because I think about it, the thing about like skin versus having fur is that skin has a certain sensitivity. You can sort of feel objects more. You can kind of feel the air in a more way. You're not like insulated by that. And I think when we think of consciousness, we only think about the brain. But I think in terms of like just having, higher sensory capabilities, and so when it comes to things like skin, smell, sight, I think that also has that also factors in terms of intelligence and consciousness when you put it in the body. And Franklin, you mentioned evolution earlier and why you're kind of like iffy about it. And I think I can kind of explain why, because if you think about evolution, there's two different ways to look at it. You can look at evolution from a kind of materialist epistemological standpoint, or you can look at it from a panpsychist epistemological standpoint. And if you really think about it, when you run it through those two different variables, you get very different narratives about the nature of evolution, organisms, how they organize. Because from the materialist theory, everything is without will, it's deterministic, it's just kind of blind Newtonian physics that just complexifies. And according to that theory of evolution, things can't evolve like quickly and like spontaneously. They have to come from this slow, steady state. But if we look at it from a panpsychist point of view, and that there's a kind of intentionality or a certain incentive structure in regards to evolution, then the idea of something like, the human brain capacity evolving over a very short period of time, or like the people on the island in the Indian Ocean, like you said, who grew a larger spleen to become more adapted to the water. If we take a more panpsychist view of evolution, then you can explain those kinds of jumps and those kinds of deviations from the sort of the human form, which I think that, because it's like, even if you're not like a woo-woo believer, even if you're like just totally not into magic and the cult, like you have to kind of admit that like this sort of materialist framework for understanding reality is not just limited in terms of understanding spiritual phenomena, but just regular phenomenon in general. It's a very limited sort of tool set. So I think that when it comes to evolution, there's different ways to look at it and interpret it. And there's different epistemological theories you can kind of extrapolate from them.
I'm hearing Rob, and I must admit, like, I've had a lot of experiences with seals because I used to surf when I was young, and seals are like dogs. I always call seals dogs. And I knew this when I was a kid because they'd come and bark at us. They'd come and play with us in the water, jump. They literally jump on your board, man. They come and jump on your board with you and like, flap, 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 smash, smash, splash, roof, 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 like a little dog. It's like you want a ball to throw for them. I often consider taking a ball with me to throw for the seals to see if they'll go and fetch it,
We look like a seal to sharks sometimes. We're on a boogie board with our hands or feet hanging off the back. And when they bite us, we taste really salty and they spit us out.
Yeah, no, we definitely don't got the taste. But no. Rob makes a point out that the seals have got fur. I think that's quite interesting. Dolphins and humans have got this something going on here.
Seals have been at sea for about 20 million years, whereas dolphins have been at sea for 40 million years. Whereas the Sirenians, the manatee and the dugongs have been at sea for 50 million years. So it's thought that we disappeared from the fossil record for about 4.4 million years, which is only a tenth of what the dolphins had been at sea for. So there's a chance that maybe we lived in a lake environment, semi-aquatic, for a long time, for millions of years, maybe tens of millions of years, before we became oceanic aquatic. But physiology and our diet suggests that we thrive from an ocean diet.
I would say that humans have got a very strong connection with the ocean, but my thought is that the ocean doesn't necessarily come from Earth.
Right.
I believe the ocean was imported, and I believe that much of our genetic life was imported along with the oceans.
I believe that it came with the moon as an aspect, as part of Tiamat that was destroyed and crushed. The upper waters came and crashed into us, and I feel like part of that ocean that crashed into us is still under the surface. It's locked inside of the mantle. There's an ocean underneath Georgia here that's over 4 miles deep. They couldn't get to the bottom of it. It's underground. And there's a spring that comes out with salt water from there. I have salt from it. It's called the Lithia Spring. It's thought that Ponce de Leon found that, and it's the fountain of youth.
That's very interesting. That 4-kilometer deep ocean. Like, oh my gosh, what about when that thing pops? Comes out of the ground? Like, what's going to happen to California? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's very interesting. But what I mean is the fact that we don't have skin. I mean, that we don't have fur. I think that, like, even if we, I think that, like, maybe there's something more about the fur and the skin. Like penguins, for example. Penguins have got feathers, haven't they?
Yeah.
What have they got? Have they got feathers or fur? I've been trying to figure this out. I live next to a penguin sanctuary. I still can't figure out what the hell are you made out of. But it's like a furry, feathery kind of a substance. And you see when they molt, they look hilarious. They get all fluffy.
Cute.
They become like a little sheep, when they molt. They're so cute. Unfortunately, there are not many of them anymore. This is a big problem. But Anyway, I think that the reason the humans have skin and the reason that dolphins have skin is because I think there's something between humans and dolphins that makes us really close.
Apparently, penguins
Really,
have
really, really close.
100 feathers per square inch.
Yeah.
Really small.
How many?
Hundreds feathers per square inch.
Yeah, exactly. It's feathers, but when you get close and you look at it, it's like that looks like fur, but it's definitely not fur. You can tell it's not fur, and when you pick up the bits that they kick off, it's like that's not fur. It looks like feather, but it's like, grain feather. That makes sense. But so I think that humans have got this special ancestry, and I think the dolphins are so close to us.
Aren't dolphins too said to be a alien species of some kind that they came here from? What is it, like in the Andromeda, or one of those two that are insanely popular?
The Nomos told the Dogons that they brought dolphins and cannabis from Sirius. But other people have also claimed to have brought things like Shiva claimed to have brought wheat and honey.
But it's funny.
That's interesting.
Dolphins can be incredibly nasty, and there are stories of dolphins actually. How do I put this? Forcing themselves upon their trainers or caretakers.
They interbreed with humans, cross-species interbreeding.
Well, I mean, at least they try to,
without permission.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a story, and I believe that is,
but
of course, connected to like some kind of a.
Dolphins can also give live birth to humans. They'll help the mother push all the other people away.
Yeah.
Circle the pregnant woman. One dolphin will go under the legs, or maybe two, and then one will go under her back, and they'll help her breathe, and then they'll get the baby out and bite the umbilical cord, bring the baby up into her arms to breastfeed. And this has been documented. So that shows that we have lived with them for some time. We had animal husbandry. We were probably their pets, because I could see where they were protecting us. They may have kept us around for something, or it could have been the other way. I'm sure we helped each other in a lot of ways.
I just think that there's a lot more between humans and dolphins than what we know.
Absolutely.
And we come from the same place. And we recognize each other like, hey, we come from the same place, dude. Like, we've both got skin. Why don't we have fur or feathers like everybody else? What's wrong with us? We're different. So there's definitely something there. And obviously the killer whale is the dolphin, right? Might be 6 tons. 4 or 5, 6 tons, whatever. It's a dolphin.
Could that be the connection with mermaids? Because like people keep saying like, oh no, it's the manatee, and it's like, dude, I don't care how long you've been at sea. A manatee, like it doesn't look that attractive.
They did like
either way, And if you're desperate, just grab one of your crewmates.
Voluptuous women were more attractive in the old days.
Yeah.
In Greco times.
Even then, though, I get what Stein is talking about. I never really like, whether you believe mermaids are real or not, the idea that they mistook them for like manatees. That hypothesis never made sense to me either.
And if there's such a close connection to dolphins and humans, and maybe a connection, a spiritual connection that goes like way back, and they, we are so deeply connected, and they are still so incredibly intelligent, and they have a tendency to force themselves onto people. I mean, just look behavior wise, I would find it more likely than the manatee, no matter how much you like a voluptuous woman, and I do not disagree with that, by the way.
It's kind of like the dolphins can choose between good or evil, if you think about it.
They do. Yeah.
Intelligent. Very super intelligent. So I found that diagram that I was going to put up, by the way, to bring us back to the numerations idea, which I think is like really, really interesting here. I hope you guys can see this very well.
Uh-huh.
Let me remove that thing. Let me remove it. Banner.
Oh, below the Stacey Lewis, you see A and B.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you have a comment pulled up.
Yeah, it's the comment I got to remove.
Yeah.
Hide current comment. There we go. So if we look at that and we take a real look at the what we're seeing here, this is like some very interesting notation of math, right? And I'll make it a little bit smaller so that it's easier to make sure that we see all of it.
Here it is. There's our B. I don't see B sharp, but might not be there.
I don't think there is a B
Why
sharp.
can't I move it up or
One
down?
of those kind of notes.
Very strange.
There's no E sharp either.
Anyway, there we go. So if we look at it carefully, what we see here is we see these numbers. 432 is an A. I think it's a middle A. And we can see all of these numbers. Now, the first thing that it strikes you about all of these numbers, what do they all have in common?
Are they divisible by
They
9?
all add up to 9.
Yeah.
And what else do we notice? The difference between C sharp and D, 9 hertz. The difference between D and D sharp, 9 hertz.
Yeah.
And so forth. So if you want to go from A to A sharp to B, all you got to do is add 18 hertz onto 216, and you end up with 234 hertz. So if you want to go from C to G, then all you need to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or if it's 7, then you've got to go 7 times 9 is 63. 63 plus 304 becomes 367. Sorry, I did something wrong. 9 times 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 756. Am I making a mistake here? Because it's 9 hertz. Oh, sorry, you're not supposed to go down. You're supposed to go across. Duh. So, but we've got this really interesting point that they all seem to add up to the scale of 9. And when we look at that, that's like really incredible, right? So it's interesting that when you add on this scale, you're adding up 8, but they all still add up to 9. So 252 plus 8 becomes 270. And now we're
18.
going 304 to 540. So this is one of these scales doing 108 to 180. So these are big scale changes.
252 to 270 is 18, which also adds up to 9.
Yeah, so those are taking into account multiple octaves. I understand why I got confused. This is the single octave from C to C sharp to D sharp. But yeah, we're dealing with 306 to 324. So that is 18, right? So we're going jumping 2 notes. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're jumping like 304 to 340. We're jumping 36. So what is 36?
9 again.
So it's interesting though how all of these numbers, and this is really bringing us back to where the Ennead and why the 9-based system, why we have 9 numerations, really comes into it. And even the obviously 432 brings us back to 4 plus 3 plus 2, which is the number base of 9. And I think that this is
432 is 360 plus 72.
360 plus 72. Yeah, that's interesting. Huh?
Yeah,
which all adds up to 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
369. It's
full circle.
But that is interesting. The 72 degrees,
2 fallen angels,
which is the pentagram, the short angle on the pentagram. Does that make sense when I say that? Do you know which one I'm talking about? What shall I?
The angles of the
Let's get a pentagram.
Zeus and acute angles.
Okay, so if we look at it here, let me. Oh, that's a really small picture. Let me find a bigger picture. Give me a second. Sorry for the delay, guys. Okay, there we go. So, present, stop screen, present. You know what? I've got this bad habit of doing this. I forget that I can just literally go to the screen and just change screen. I got to remember that for next time. So yeah, we can see. Yeah, we can see the ideas. So you can see there, you got the 72 degrees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can see you got the 108 degrees. Now this 108 degrees is the same as that, right?
Yeah.
And that 54 degrees is half of 108, right? So that line is on the midpoint. That's the midpoint of the angle, which is 54. And the complete angle is 108, which 108 plus 72 makes 180 straight line. And here we've got, once again, 72 and 108. And here we've got 72 and 108. And here we've got 72 and 108, right? And so every angle that you take, every point, so there's 5 points around here, and every point is broken by 72 and 108. It's broken that way, and it's broken that way. And it's broken that way, and it's broken that way. So you've got 10 combinations of 72 and 108 on a pentagram, right? Because that point has got two potentials. There's a straight line and there's a straight line. And both of those straight lines are broken into 108 and 72. So each point has two planes. So you've got these 5 crosses around the pentagram, and each of that cross has got 2. And then notice here that it forms what is this, an hourglass? Is this the idea of the figure of 8? You see where I'm coming from? Being expressed here as an idea, where the two angles are sort of becoming an hourglass shape. And within that, these two planes each have the 108 and 108. And when we consider this cross, we've also got the 360, which is the circle, and the square. So now we see why this shape is so fundamental to Hermes or Mercury, right? And that the number 5 is classically related to Mercury and Hermes. And I suppose the number 5 is also very relevant to Odin, right?
Number 5?
It should be, because it's relative to Shiva. Shiva is not only number 5. Shiva's numbers are diverse. The number 11 relates to Shiv Shakti, but the number 5 then relates to the idea of the divine feminine. So that magical system that Odin would have learned, that was only usually used by women, relates to, in Egypt, called the cult of Isis. And so that's the feminine path towards magic, which is a rather interesting concept. So you're right, indie brother.
Then that would either be Freya or Frigg, because Freya is the head of the Vanir, which are the more the more nature gods, nature adjacent.
Yeah.
And Frigg or Frigga is the wife of Odin. So if Odin is the divine masculine, then I would say that, at least for the Aesir, that Frigga would be the divine feminine. I mean, she is a goddess of fertility, well, marriage, prophecy, clairvoyance, and motherhood.
Yeah, hence we get Friday.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
That's Freya. That's Freya, Frigg.
Yeah, it does come from that. All of the English weekdays come from the Norse gods.
Not all of them. Saturday, Sunday, Monday are the exception. Saturday is Saturn, Sunday, Monday, Sunday, Moonday, obviously. Tuesday is Tyr or Tiwaz, god of justice, which you can correlate to Mars as well, because he is also a warrior god of war in a way. Wednesday, Wotan, Odin. Thursday, or as we even say in the Netherlands, Donderdag, Thunder Day, Thor, Donar. The strongest, most powerful of all the gods, and a son of Odin, of course. Friday would indeed either be Freya or Frigga. To my knowledge, it's Freya, who is the, like I said, the head of the Vanir, and who controls the Valkyrie, indeed, and who has first pick over Odin for the warriors slain on the battlefield.
Yeah, because Friday is usually day, which is a fertility goddess day. I kind of associated Freya with as a warrior goddess, but she's also a fertility goddess as well, right? Is that true?
Yeah, she's the goddess of love, literally the goddess of love and war. You could say that her slogan is "Lay 'em or slay 'em."
It's like Aphrodite and Athena.
Look, war makes people mate.
It does.
Because like when you're afraid, you want to mate. When you want to celebrate, you want to mate. When you go to war and you're losing your sons in a war, your instinct is to replace it quickly, keep the population going. So there's an inner instinct in everybody to replace people when they pass away. And also then of course there's the crazy hormones. In men, they get so adrenaline up, and the adrenaline is in the kidneys, right? And the kidneys is where we store our jing, our sexual essence. So our sexual essence gets fired up when we get adrenaline, charged up. Which is why, like men, if they can't get it up, they shouldn't be popping pills. They should be jumping off bridges with elastics tied to their feet. That'll get you hard.
I would much rather do that. Just get the adrenaline going. Yeah.
Probably just as much chance of a heart attack. But anyway, moral of the story is stay fit.
It's a fair risk, Heart attack or hard attack.
A heart attack sounds much more fun. But if you have to choose between a heart attack or a heart attack, which one would it be? But I know what the ladies would choose anyway. But I do get the sense that there's a lot here, and Rob mentions as well, very interestingly enough. What did he mention? What did Rob mention? He mentioned, and it's interesting that obviously the phi is a big thing, right? When it comes to this numeration, to this idea of the pentagram, and the fact that when you add up the hours, how many hours are there in 9 days? Yeah. So it's 200, and so 9 times 20 is 160. Wait, 9 times 20 is 180, and 9 times 4 is 4 times 9 is 36. 36 plus 180 becomes 216. 216 happens to be half of 432. So Odin was upside down hanging on Yggdrasil for half of 432 hours. It's an interesting concept when you think of it. Those numbers are not arbitrary. I don't think there was an arbitrary. I think it was a particular ritual, right? Where people would hang if they could make it. If they could survive the ritual of being crucified on the tree in order to go into the underworld and experience a rebirth and awaken to all of the powers. But I do get the sense that when we're looking at all of these numbers, it all seems to come back to the 9, to the Ennead, and even with the 12. Now, I've noticed there's a movement on Earth that wants to move away from our 9-based math, which I find interesting. What they actually want to do is they want to invent 2 more numerations. They want to invent a 10, which is a numeration, which it isn't, because a 10 is actually a group of 1 and 0, and an 11 is a group of 1 and 1. So it's not a number, but it's a complex number, right? A complex number which is compounded by numbers.
Like 12 number, like 10 would become A, 11 would become B, and then 12 would become 10.
So as a concept, when I think about this, it doesn't add up, because even the Sumerians, they used a 12 set number of notation, right? But they still only used the 9 numbers.
Yeah.
And even when we looked at this chart that we were looking at before, right? It still comes back to the root of 9. Even when you're in the root of 12, 12 has got a lot of advantages over 10. But 10 is still the simplest. Even though 12 has got advantages over 10, 10 is the simplest, because when you think of 10 to become 100, you just add a 0. When you think of it to become 1,000, you just add a 0. You don't have to think.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do any math. You don't have to do arithmetic. You just put a 0 in there.
Like in a 6-base number system, 5 becomes 10. 6 becomes 10, and 5 becomes the magic number. So in a 12-base number system, 12 becomes 10, and 11 becomes the magic number.
But 11 is already a magic number, even in the 9-base system. Well, it's not a number.
And if you're in a 12-base system, if you multiply anything by 11, the digits will add up to 11. Like in a 6-base system, the same thing will happen with 5. So when you make the system and you make it, the base becomes 10, it makes it simple. But for us to compute that and change it in our minds is very difficult. But if you were to train children to have a 6 or 12-base number system, where 10 would be 6 or 12, it'd be very simple for them. And it's much easier to break down a 12 into thirds and fourths, whereas 10 can only break down into a fifths only, and that's in halves.
That's because of the number of fingers in our hands. That's where a number system is based on.
But the giants had 12 fingers. And it said in the Sardinia, the people called the giants the Basa-Juan. And they have these ancient megalithic structures that they said the Basa-Juan built for them and taught them how to build. They taught them how to farm. They taught them architecture. They're considered to be the similar to the American Bigfoot for the Sardinian people. But they were extremely advanced. But they tended to want to live in nature and thrive in nature. But they could tell people how to do things that were aligned with nature, like building megalithic structures for their agriculture and things, and for their homes.
I had a really weird idea. I wonder what you guys think about it. What if you had an infinite number-based system? So there'd be literally a symbol for every number that exists. I was just kind of like thinking about that, like how insane that would be. So you never have like multiple digits, the same. It would just be a different symbol for every number that exists. So like,
well, you could.
That's like it's. And also think too, like. Numbers are kind of a language if you think about it. If you take like infinity and you think about it as a circle, right? Every base number system is kind of like a pizza pie kind of cut division of those. And from that, you get different symmetries, different geometries. And it's almost kind of like, it's kind of like a religion or an operating system, depending upon, or like a programming language of reality. What were you going to say, Indy? I'm sorry. I think I cut you off.
No, I was saying that'd be really cool. I'm working on a system where you could do that, where like any symbol that has 8 lines represents the number 8, the 8th letter, the 8th note, and the 8th story.
Well, that is how we got our numbers. From the Arab countries, it's the number of angles in the number. So the number 1 wasn't just like a straight line. It was like, so one angle. 2 would be 2 angles, and et cetera, et cetera. That's where we got our number system from, and over time it became more fluid and rounded, of course. And I mentioned that to Franklin in a voice note, but if we're considering numbers and timelines and such, how about our calendar? Our calendar absolutely makes no freaking sense in a way that we have set it up now, the Gregorian calendar, at least, because you were talking about 12 and like 10 and makes no sense or whatever, but it actually does for our calendar, because if we were to smooth it out and have like 28 days in a month, we'd have 13 perfect months, with each month starting on a Monday, which would also follow the I believe the lunar cycle much more closely.
Oh yeah, and the menstrual cycles as well. 4 weeks is a month, 28-day months.
Yeah, 4 weeks. You always have, or so many times you have like 2 days left in your month, but it's already been 4 weeks.
It'd be like going from the empirical system to the decimal system in our calendars. They tried to impose the international fixed calendar that you're talking about. I think in the mid 20th century, but it was turned down because they could not divide the year into a biannual division for finances, which you really could. You could just take the middle month and divide it in half, because it's exactly 4 weeks. So 2 weeks on one, 2 weeks on the other side. It shouldn't have been that hard for them, but they wanted all the months to be divided in half. So they took it out. But probably because 13 is an unlucky number, because they're trying to cover up the lost golden matriarchy. 13 is the number of the matriarchal number of the divine feminine.
Yeah, 13, the unlucky number 13, of course, all that bullshit, the Knights Templar.
But it really goes back to the 12 months in the menstrual cycle being
under
the rug, when women have been enslaved for thousands of years and their wisdom has been pushed away.
I also think too, like, how many more New Year's resolutions could get fulfilled if the year started in the spring? I always thought it weird that the year starts in January, like just like in the middle of winter.
It doesn't make any sense. That's why the pagan calendar starts in March.
So the day should start at dawn, the year should start at spring, but we're controlled by a moon cult. The Hebrew people developed our calendar. They're a moon cult. They have 13 and 7 involved in their system of months. They'll have 7, 13
7 days in a week. Yeah.
And then they'll have 5 12-month years in their cycles. So some of their months have 13 months in the Hebrew calendar.
That's a very interesting point. I did a video about Yule. I don't know who caught that video about Yule, and
that's cool.
That's why we have New Year's on the 1st, because Yule, the most traditional form of Yule, was 12 days. Then at some point it became a 9-day festival. At some point, some cultures try to turn it into 3 days.
I mean,
even 12 Christmas days was modeled.
The 12 days of Christmas.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The 12 days of Christmas, like it's still in the song. But now for some reason it's only 2.
But they try to change it to Romanize it, because according to the Romans, the first day of the Romans celebrated the winter solstice on the 25th, because there's 3 days that the sun is out of alignment, 72 hours. Right? That's 72. So they didn't count the 21st. They went from 21st to 22nd to 23rd, and then they celebrated it the next day of the night, the 24th, which is like makes me dizzy. But anyway, it's to their own. That to me, like, the solstice is still on the 21st, and I can't unlearn that. But that's where Yule comes from.
It's
So
the returning of the light. It's on the 21st, on the equinox, where the day and night are equally as long, and then gradually over the months until the official spring, the days start to become a little longer and a little longer and a little longer, and until we are at the point of year where at 11 in the evening, like, it's still freaking light outside. And I can't wait for those days again. I'm fucking tired of winter already.
So I think that's why the new year is the new year, because the sun dies, and then the sun is reborn after solstice. That spent three hours on the 3 days on the cross, and then the sun gets celebrated for 7 days, and on the 8th day after that, there is this. Now we make our resolutions, and so the last day of Yule is when you've done all of your days. You've gone through your wild hunt. Well, your first divine feminine, then your wild hunt, then you've gone through the family day, then you've gone through the community day, which is Odin's day, is the day of the community. Everybody gets celebrated, gifts. Yeah. Then after Odin's day, you go through what's the one after Odin's day? You go into that celebration of it's not the power. The power comes the day after. 7 is the day of wisdom. That's the day of auguries. 6 is the day of the 6th day is the day of celebrating, I believe, Brigit. The 8th day is the day of power and of like conquests and meditating on bringing in power and having a feast. And then the 9th day is the day of protection, making protective amulets. Is it the 9th day? I believe it's the 9th day. Then the 10th day is the festival of contemplation and bringing it back to, the 6th day is actually the day that you bring the fir tree in. I almost said the fir tree. The fir tree comes in the day after Odin's day. That's the evergreen, representing the eternal life of Odin, hanging all that time and coming back and going, I'm immortal. And then
day.
Sorry?
The wild hunt is the 5th day?
No, the wild hunt comes before. It's early.
Oh, okay. And then Odin's day is different than the wild hunt?
No, Odin's day is the celebration of this is when Odin is becoming enlightened.
Okay. Because I know Odin means wild hunt. His name means wild hunt. Or head of
the whole celebration is Odin.
The leader of the wild hunt.
He is the leader of the wild hunt, and his name translates to the Furious One, I believe.
Doesn't it mean wooden? Wood, the wood leader of the wood hunt.
Trees and all have always been very important to us Europeans. I know that I don't know which tree Odin. Probably the ash tree, since Yggdrasil is an ash tree, and it was the first two humans were Ash and Elm, and it was Odin who breathed.
That's the Yule log
into them. Yeah, and then you have Thor, Donar, the strongest of all the gods, who is associated with, at least here in Northern Europe, the strongest and most durable of all the trees, the oak tree. And then the birch tree is associated with Baba Yaga, actually going a little more eastern. And the birch tree is the one with what looks like all the eyes on it, ever watching.
Mm-hmm. Rob points out an interesting point about them still putting oak leaves on military uniforms. Very interesting,
Makes sense.
And in South Africa, we our slang, if you're talking about guys, you say, "Oh, this oak came up to us, and I met this oak over there." We talk about like another guy as an oak. It's just it's a short for man. If you're talking about an oak, it's a man.
Yeah, the Druid formidable warriors against the Romans, and it made a lasting impression upon them. They used to keep the Roman heads on pikes. They were scared of them.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing of human sacrifices. There were mostly prisoners of war that we would sacrifice to Odin. Odin is like he's the furious one. He is the in his hall of Valhalla, where all the slain warriors go. Like he doesn't want some jackass off the street. Like he needs warriors, he needs soldiers, he needs freaking men. So yeah, of course you're gonna give him some prisoners of war, especially the military men. And head on a pike, yeah, I mean it's worked for centuries, it's worked forever, really. So yeah, I think just as the Romans in the Teutoburg forest. They have I
think the Celtic woman was scary. Just like the Norse woman was scary. I think they were more scared of the woman because they didn't know what to make of them. Like, do I hit you? Too late.
Do not underestimate our women.
Probably don't want to hit her.
Yeah, like do not underestimate our women. They are sometimes even scarier than the men. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Viking women ruled the tribes, apparently. Is that so?
I mean, they had to, if the men were out on a hunt or they were out Viking, it was the women who had to take care of the farm, take care of the homestead, take care of the animals and the kids. They had to be strong. They had to be.
I think things work better that way.
Powerful, fierce women, because if your man is away for war and somebody who like some other man who stayed behind was like, hey, your man ain't here, I'm feeling frisky.
Right. I mean, I know that the men that cheated in the Viking tribes would be castrated by the women by the Viking law in the tribes.
Yeah. And probably. I mean, I know Firefey would definitely do that to me.
Maybe she was somewhat of a hypocrite. I don't know.
No, but like the women. I mean, they ruled the household.
Yeah.
It's.
She goes off to die. She needs a new man, anyways.
Right? Yeah, I mean, like. I think it's then it would mostly be like a marriage of I hate to put it like this, but of convenience. Like you need a protector, you need someone to look over you, look over the kids, and all of that. Because if you have the man as protector of the household, then the woman can be the one who runs the household. If she doesn't have to worry about any like outside influence, if you will, then she can do her job as the matriarch.
In a lot of patriarchal societies, the brother would usually take on the wives of his brother. If he had lost his brother, he would be responsible.
Yeah, that did happen. Not sure how that would have been in the like just regular society.
Yeah, more of a patriarchal thing, I would guess. I know that the Vikings celebrated the sun as a female goddess for a time, at least.
I mean, yeah, Sona, I believe she was a female goddess, which makes sense. Bringer of light, bringer of life. You always got, very happy when you see the sun, and I can definitely say that if I see my wife, I do become very happy. So yeah, it makes sense, and her consort would then be the moon, which would be, is the shining silver light, like lighting up the darkness, which would be the job of men, making sure that you can see in the dark, that you are safe in the dark, if you will. Yeah, you're a protector too, sort of. Yeah.
Makes a
You
lot of
know,
sense.
it's very interesting. You were mentioning the Vanir earlier,
Mhm.
and you're Dutch,
Yeah.
right?
As can
Wanneer
be.
gaan jy aan vakansie? So the word Vanir and Vanir, you can't not notice the connection.
Vanir.
Is it vagina?
Yeah,
Because that relates to time, right?
yeah.
Right.
So it relates to when, time. It means when, basically, right? When,
Yeah.
Vanir. So when we look at what the Vanir represent, the Vanir represents foresight, fertility, wealth, and wisdom. So your wealth and your wisdom was based upon how long you'd been on the planet. Foresight is based upon knowing what's going to happen before it happens. Having a calendar is quite a good way to have foresight. And it also helps increase your fertility, because if you know when's the right time to plant seeds, or when's the right time to breed your horses or your cows or your sheep, then you are going to increase the fertility of your creatures. And this is why calendars were originally created, I think.
Als je weet wanneer, if you know wanneer, if you know when. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there's an element of foresight involved, like the very word wanneer, like in Afrikaans, we have the same word. And that involves what's going to happen in the event of this. It's got to do with exercising foresight. And it's also got to do with knowing the consequentiality of things, cause and effect. So it's very interesting when we speak about this wanneer. I always think to myself, what is their relation to Saturn and the number 8? Even though they represent Isis and the number 5, there always seems to be this connection. In the older times, Saturnial presences were seen as feminine, in the same way that at the time that the solar presence was seen as feminine. At that time, the Saturnian presence was seen as feminine. At that time, the lunar presence was seen as masculine. And you mentioned Odin's name, meaning fear. The oldest name, well, something like fear. The oldest name of Shiva.
Furious one.
Well, basically, that's the same name as the oldest name of Shiva, Rudra. Rudra means extreme anger. And so when we look at Shiva's animal was the crow.
Odin's animal is the raven. Same family.
Well, crow, raven, different lands. It's the same.
They're both Corvids. It's like literally a matter of opinion.
Yeah, raven's just basically like a big crow, from what I understand.
Yeah, big and a lot more hoarse. Like their voice is a lot hoarser.
Yeah, the bigger. And Shiva's also got the one eye, the eye of Shiva. And Shiva's Trisul is an interesting concept because it involves the 3 principles. And I think this brings us back to numbers. Like when we look at the old form of deity, who was talking about that it started with 3 principles? I think this is why the Ennead exists, why we have 9 days, why everything's broken into 9, because we started off with 3, the 3 fundamental principles: the past, the present, and the future, right? You, me, and what's between us. And the triangle becomes the fundamental structure that we can sort of use for building, right? You want to build a roof, you make a triangle.
Yeah. What came first, the Ennead or the Ogdoad?
The
Ogdoad is 8.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Ennead and the Ogdoad are the same thing, but they are looked at through a different way. The same way that we speak about the elements, right? We speak about the elements, the 4 elements. In Taoism, they speak about the 5 elements, but the 5 elements is the 4 elements.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I think there's 8 gates in the 9. Right?
Yeah.
So I feel like
Exactly.
they're like just like Odin has the ring that makes 8 new rings over 9 days.
Yeah.
It-
The 9
I
circles
think
of
that
hell.
that's
you
that's
also
the
have.
relationships between the 9 things.
Yeah.
So that the one is looking at the 9 principles, and then the other one is looking at the 8 relationships between the 9 principles. So that would be a more mystical side of looking at things, right? The Ogdoad would be going into the more mystical. The 9 is like the manifestational, this is what it is. So we speak of the 9 sort of planetary presences. And this is quite interesting when we look at like a Vedic astrological chart is, and how did you guys like the picture that I had here? The Saturn cross. Saturn
Yeah.
square, sorry. That's what I used as the base picture for, and I'll bring one up so that everyone can take a look at it. Saturn square moon natal. Who did that? I didn't say that. I just said Saturn square. There we go. That's all I wanted. Thank you very much. All we needed. So now here we got an interesting one where we could see the trying to find a nice looking one. Just take a picture. Now there's different ways of representing this square as well. And I like to find the ones that appeal to my sensibilities. Call me biased if you like, I don't mind. There we go, the old school. And there's obviously different ways of the patterns, whether you're running from the left or the right. Yeah. Let's see that that's big enough. Yeah, it's big enough. So what I would say is this, like, take a look at how these numbers play out here. And we can see why Saturn, that you mentioned Saturn earlier.
You'll have to put it on screen first, though. Yeah, there we go.
So there we can see it, and it's quite simple. And we can see here there's something very interesting going on because the center of it is 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the heart of the story is 5, the pentagram. But we can see then 2, 4, 6, 8. Interesting. So it's running from right to left. 2, 4, 6, 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1, 3, 7, 9 diagonally. So what we've got here is a 5 in the center, 2, 4, 6, 8. Then diagonally 1, 3, 7, 9. So we're taking into account directions here, which is quite interesting. We're building the cube out of this numbers. But you can also see how obviously all the numbers add up to 15, which is 6, right? And there's something quite profound when we look at this, because this is talking about how the 9 numbers bring us back to that 6. So if you put all 9 numbers, which is the Ennead, onto a single thing, you end up with the cube of Saturn if it's arranged like this. And it works out whichever way you take it, right? So whether you're going vertically, whether you're going horizontally, it adds up to the same number. Even if you say you go diagonally, 2 plus 8 plus 5, 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go from left to right, 15. You go from top to bottom or bottom to top, 15. Whichever way you add 3 numbers, you end up with the same number, 15. And so that 15 sort of brings us back to recognizing this. And also the fact that we've got 9 blocks here is reflecting the principle of 3. Because you got the 3 principles running in 4 cycles around. So the 4, 9, 2 is one line, 2, 7, 6 is another line, 6, 1, 8 is so you got the 4 elements being represented, all bound around the number 5.
Yeah, and the 5 gets lost when they created the trigrams from the surrounding cubes, or the surrounding squares.
Sorry,
5,
brother, what was that?
5 does not have an equivalent trigram. It does not become anything, but the other numbers all become the 8 trigrams.
That number 5 is so fundamental because it's the center of all the numbers.
I consider it to be similar to the Da'at in the Sephirothic labyrinth, which is the root, which is usually hidden or unseen, is the 5 disappears when they move to the trigrams.
That's quite interesting, because if you look at 5 through different cultural lineages, so like if you look at 5 in terms of the Kabbalah, right, it represents severity. It represents a severe demeanor of being strict, of outlining the discipline of the law, adhering to the law with unwavering focus, and being hard. There's a hard element to the number 5, and so the number 5 relates to, on some level, to anger, which is why Shiva's number is number 5, right?
That's
most Rudraksh will be the 5 Mukhi.
I think 5 is also considered to be a crossroad and represents transformation or change, being that it's a halfway point. And in this Bagua square right here, we see that 5 is definitely a crossroad that connects all of the different points together.
And another thing about the number 5 that I find interesting, and it's more of an everyday thing, and for the men in chat, you can tell me if I'm right or not. When you're like doing the or setting the volume on your TV, it always has to be a even number for some reason.
Yeah.
Unless it's 5. Like 5 is just, it's either even or 5. And that's it. It's like 5 is some sort of a, yeah.
And I feel like 5 in anger and wrath really parallel with transformation and change, because when you're controlled by your fears, the only way to step out of that is to confront your fears, which is through anger and wrath. We deny our fears, or we challenge our fears. And so when we're challenging our fears, we begin to transform and we begin to grow and change. And I feel like that's what 5 represents for me. 5 is a time of transformation and growth, but it requires adversity and hardship to be able to catalyze the challenge that's going to bring the change.
I was looking up the pattern, like the zigzag pattern, like across that little board, because it reminded me of the Suwolu rune, which in Germanic mythology represents the sun, embodying themes of light, energy, and success. It is the, what does it say? The 16th, I believe, if I read correctly, of the Elder Futhark. Yeah, the 16th rune. So it's like the lightning bolt rune, Suwolu. And if you like how you drew those patterns over the number pad, either way, it is a lightning bolt kind of shape. And with the 5 in the middle, the pentagram, the the truth, the light, then it would make sense that the Suwolu at the middle point is the number 5, is the light.
Does it also represent the sun or the wheel of power?
Yeah, it's the name is derived from Sol, meaning sun. Yeah.
So that's quite interesting, because when we look at the numerology of 5, so if you go to Vedic numerology, which is sort of like what numerology seems to have scoped around, 5 represents the pentagram, which obviously represents humanity, mankind, which is the number of Mercurius. Now, Mercury is that aspect which, once again, now we're talking about what we were talking about in the beginning, right? That aspect of us, which can be both in the mundane physical world but can also reach into the divine world simultaneously. So we're talking about Odin having the ability to have his feet planted on the physical plane and be a physical being, but also have access to the most divine planes. And so Mercury was represented as, like in the Greeks, as having like wings on the feet and wings on the hat, to represent that basically both his head and his feet were able to move. And he could fly between up the tree and down the tree of life. He could go anywhere in Yggdrasil. And so the number 5 being the midpoint means, for example, let's get that number back, right? So this is the other point. The only number touched by every other number is 5.
Yeah.
It's the common number. 9 doesn't touch 1. 7 doesn't touch 6, right? 8 doesn't touch 2, and 4 doesn't touch 6. And 4 doesn't touch 8. But 5 touches all of these numbers. It's quite incredible when you think about it. And so the Saturn square is relating to the black old sun. Won't you come wash away the rain? That black old sun, that Saturnal cube, is so fundamental. And this sort of brings us back to looking at the number of the Saturnal cube. So once again, that number 2160 comes up. 2160 is also, if you draw the seed of life, you start with one circle, then you put the pistos in, then the viscous, you draw 6 circles around each other, creating 6 petals, that sacred pineal gland, but also 6 times 360 brings us back to that same 2160 number. And that number, which is that cosmic month, or that great month, as it was called by the Mayans, and relates to our vernal equinox, the wobble of the earth, right, is so fundamentally important to the calculation of our time, for greater calculations of time, because that number has got to be taken into account for any long-term calendar to exist. So it brings us back to this notion of the cube. Now, the cube having six squares is also 2160. And so when you look at the flower of life, which is the expansion of the seed of life, expanded outwards, 6 times more around itself, right? Then you end up with the flower of life, which is the big glyph. And within the flower of life,